as you've heard, my name is Chandler, and today I'm here to talk to you about perfectionism and depression. First, I would like to tell you exactly what perfectionism is. Perfectionism is a personality trait characterized by an intense desire for perfection, often accompanied by an overly critical view of oneself, as well as having excessively high standards for one's performance. This raises the question as to what is perfection. By definition, perfection is being perceived as flawless. Being that's a perception means that it's different for everyone. People can see perfection as having a nice car, or looking good, or having a great career. But today, I hope to change how you perceive perfection. First, I would like to tell you a little bit more about myself. I myself am a perfectionist. I will tell you this, so will my friends and family. As far back as I can remember, I've been this way. For example, when I was 12 years old, I played soccer as a defender, and my coach told me not to cross the center line. Now, at this age, it was normal to give rules like this to defenders, but most kids would still go beyond the center point, but I wouldn't. Instead, I would run up to that line, and I would stop. I wouldn't go past it no matter what. Even if the ball was a foot in front of me, I wouldn't step over that line. Because for me, if I stepped over that line, I felt like I made a mistake. And for me, perfection was defined as not making a mistake. Now, for any sport, this definition is terrible, because to be good at a sport, you need to take risks, and risks open you up to making mistakes. But academically, this definition fits perfectly, because good grades come from a lack of mistakes. As a result, my perfectionism allowed me to succeed academically. Unfortunately, perfectionism is a double-edged sword. On one edge, perfectionists strive for perfection, for example, not making mistakes on a test. But on the other edge, if a perfectionist doesn't reach their high standards for their performance, it can bring on feelings of hopelessness and depression. Even the smallest mistake can bring out these feelings. Psychologists have noticed that perfectionists actually find stressful events to be more stressful. And even as early as 1986, researchers found a correlation between perfectionism and depression. Now this brings me to the second part of my talk, depression. Depression can affect anybody at any stage of their life. And university students seem to be at an excessively high risk, and therefore at a higher risk of committing suicide. For university students, suicide is the second leading cause of death. In non-university students between the ages of 15 and 24, suicide is the third leading cause of death. Although this is high, university students seem to be at an even greater risk. This could be due to the high prevalence of depression in the undergraduate population. In a recent survey done in 2012, they found that 1 in 3 university students report feeling depressed. As you can see, this is not a small issue. I was that 1 in 3. And I very well could have been another statistic, because at university I struggled with both depression as well as suicidal thoughts. Research has even shown that there's a correlation between perfectionism and suicidal intent that is independent of depression, putting perfectionists, including myself, at a greater risk of committing suicide. Now, I was lucky enough to overcome these struggles, largely because I went to a small university. I found that small universities cared about their students. Before deciding upon Acadia, I looked at many different schools. I looked at big ones and small ones. I ended up deciding upon a small one because I felt like the entire university, professors as well as students, seemed to truly care about who you were as a person. Now, I know that this experience is not unique to Acadia. I know that's here at Bishop's as well from my brother's firsthand experience. Research has shown that people at small universities know and care more about each other than people at large universities. Now, after I decided that I was going to go to a small university, and after being accepted into Acadia, my perfectionism kicked into high gear. It made me strive for the best possible marks in all my classes. Because for me, perfection in university was first, getting good grades, and second, having a social life. So during the day, I would be social, hanging out with friends, and at night I would study. I would rewrite my notes multiple times until I could literally write them out by memory. As a result, I was able to study every day, all day. So when I was hanging out with my friends, I was still reviewing my notes in my head. And because I was constantly studying, I did well in my midterms. And because I'd memorized my notes, I was able to seem like I was social. Because of this, I seemed well-adjusted in university. But I wasn't. In my head, I was slowly falling apart because I was constantly studying. And it got worse when I started getting my grades back. Now, perfectionism is often accompanied by an overly critical view of oneself. And for me, that's very true. So when I started getting my grades back, all I would see were mistakes. So instead of seeing 80% right, I would see 20% wrong. And if all you see are mistakes, you struggle to feel good about yourself. Research has shown that this is not a unique experience, and perfectionists actually focus on mistakes more than non-perfectionists, and this can very easily and quickly make someone feel depressed. Where am I now? Yes, okay. So, since I was only seeing mistakes, I really struggled with feeling good about myself. And this started bringing on feelings of hopelessness and depression. To deal with these feelings, I started to self-medicate with alcohol. And this form of self-medication is very common among university students. In fact, 90% of university students have a diagnosable alcohol use disorder. So, it's a big issue. Now, for me, self-medicating with alcohol didn't help my depression. In fact, it made it worse. In some people, alcohol can trigger depression. For me, it amplified it. This is when I was at my lowest point. I felt out of control and like I was never going to succeed. Even my friends started noticing something was wrong. I wasn't sleeping very much, I wasn't eating very much, and I stopped talking to a lot of people because I was always worried about my grades, and I was constantly studying. So at this time, I just wanted everything to stop so I could recover physically and mentally. I even contemplated suicide. But at this point, my friends were there for me. They told me that something was wrong and I needed to get professional help. So I did. I went to a doctor to get help with my depression. But no one ever asked if I was a perfectionist. Everyone would ask things like, are you stressed? Or how are you doing in school? Being a perfectionist, I would say, yeah, I'm stressed. I'm doing terrible in school and I'm never going to succeed. But if a doctor would have asked me, what are your actual grades? They would have seen that I wasn't doing terrible. In fact, I was doing quite well. This could have led them to find out that I was a perfectionist and they could have dealt with me differently. I ended up talking to counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, and medical doctors, and they all came to the same conclusion, that I was stressed because of school. And they're partially right. University is very stressful, both financially and academically. But I wasn't only stressed because of school, I was also stressed because I was a perfectionist, and I wasn't reaching my high standards for my performance. To describe what happened, I would like to use the analogy of a dandelion weed. So, the flower is the depression, the stem is the stress, and the perfectionism is the root. Now, the only way to truly remove a weed is to remove the roots. But no one ever found my roots. Instead, doctors prescribed me with medication, or to go along with the analogy, weed killer. This effectively removed the stem and the flower, but left the roots untouched. As a result, the root of my problem would continue to make stems and flowers. This medication did help me though, and it can help a lot of people who are experiencing depression. It increased my mood, I had better sleeping and eating patterns, I was all of a sudden feeling happy. But the root of my problem was still there. I was still a perfectionist. So at this point, I was feeling happy, but I was taking medication for it. And this made me feel flawed. My perfectionism wouldn't allow this. It wouldn't let me feel like I was flawed. So I decided I would stop taking my medication. At this point, I experienced a shift. The shift I experienced is in how I perceive perfection. I used to see perfection as not making mistakes and having success in school. Now I see perfection as simply happiness. By definition, happiness is a mental or emotional state of well-being characterized by positive or pleasant emotions ranging from contentment to intense joy. When I came to this realization that perfection should be happiness, I decided to change my major to something I enjoyed. This was largely possible because I went to a small university where all the professors seemed to know each other, and changing majors was painless. Now, the other thing I did was I stopped taking courses I hated and started to take courses that I was really interested in and found enjoyable. And now, I didn't do perfect in these classes, but I enjoyed what I was learning and I focused on that. I didn't focus on a letter grade or a specific test. Instead, I focused on being happy with learning. And this has helped me a lot. Yes, sometimes I do slip back in my old view of perfection, but I always remind myself that perfection should be happiness, and that puts things into perspective. For me, this has lowered my stress, helped immensely with my depression, and has overall made me happier. I've uprooted my dandelion and it's not coming back. Now, today I've talked about two very important things that help me with my perfectionism and depression. The first is the small university environment. In this environment, I felt like people cared, and people did. My friends cared enough to tell me something was wrong and I needed to get help. Also, in the small university environment, I was able to change my majors with relative ease, allowing me to enjoy the rest of my university experience. And in upper year courses, professors gave me personalized feedback, allowing me to celebrate the success on a midterm rather than dwelling on the mistakes. The second thing that helped me was changing how I perceived perfection. So, earlier today I told you that I hope to change how you perceive perfection. And what I would like you to see perfection as is simply happiness. By changing how we see perfection, it can change our life goals and even our everyday lives. This has lowered my stress and made me overall happier. I've never fallen to my lowest point, and it's because instead of fighting my perfectionism, I decided to change how I perceived perfection. As a result, today I can honestly say that I am perfect because I'm happy. Thank you.